My name is Amelia, and I'm 28 years old. Yesterday I stood in an ivory lace gown, surrounded by lilies and roses, waiting for my parents to walk me down the aisle. They never came. I married the love of my life with a gaping hole in my heart where my family was supposed to be. This morning I found out why. The reason wasn't a tragedy or a sudden emergency. It was a betrayal so calculated and cruel it was printed in black and white on the front page of the city's business journal for the whole world to see. They didn't just miss my wedding. They used it as a cover to destroy my future and humiliate me, all for the sake of my golden child brother. What they didn't know was that their very public act of treachery had just armed me with a secret weapon they never saw coming, a weapon that would change everything. If you've ever felt like your love for your family was a one-way street, a thankless job, you were never allowed to quit, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Before I tell you how this absolute nightmare unfolded, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this story of ultimate family betrayal ends. Before yesterday, before the empty front pew and the silence where their applause should have been, my life felt like it was finally blessedly falling into place. I'm a librarian at the city's main branch, not a glamorous job, not the kind that makes for exciting dinner party conversation, but it's a role I cherish. There's a quiet, profound satisfaction in connecting people with stories and curating a peaceful haven in a relentlessly noisy world. For the past 4 years, my own story has been intertwined with Mark's. He's an architect, a man whose kindness and integrity are as solid and well-designed as the beautiful buildings he creates. He is my calm in the storm, the man who saw the real me when my own family often seemed to look right through me, seeing only a convenience or a fallback plan. To truly understand the depth of what happened on my wedding day, you have to understand the family I come from. My parents, Richard and Carol Vance, are respected members of the community, the picture of middle-class success. But behind the closed doors of our pristine suburban home, their love, their attention, and their resources have always been a powerful current flowing in one direction toward my younger brother Leo. I was the responsible one, the old reliable daughter. The one who got straight A's, worked part-time jobs through high school and college, and never asked for much because I knew the family well was reserved for my brother's thirst. Leo was the dreamer, the charismatic risk-taker who could spin a tale of future glory and charm his way out of any trouble. In our family's unspoken constitution, my responsibility was treated as an expectation, a tax I paid for existing. His recklessness was rebranded as ambition, a virtue to be nurtured and, most importantly, funded. This wasn't just a feeling or a secret resentment. It was the documented, painful truth of my entire life. I remember my 17th birthday with painful clarity. I had saved up for 2 solid years working weekends at a diner to buy my first car, a 10-year-old but dependable Toyota sedan. I was incandescent with pride. It was my freedom, a tangible result of my own hard work. A month later, Leo, who had just gotten his license and a warning for speeding, took it out without asking. He and his friends were street racing, and he wrapped my car around a telephone pole. The car was totaled. I was devastated not just for the loss of my car, but because for once I expected him to face a real consequence. Instead, my father sat me down in his study, the smell of old books and disappointment thick in the air. He explained that since Leo was so traumatized by the accident, it wouldn't be fair to punish him. The insurance payout was a pittance. My parents took that money, added a significant amount from their savings money I knew was earmarked for a new roof, and bought Leo a brand new sporty red coupe. The justification: so he wouldn't develop a fear of driving. I was given the keys to my mom's clunky decade-old minivan and told to be grateful I had anything to drive at all. The message was seared into my soul. My hard work was disposable, but my brother's fleeting feelings were a precious investment. The pattern became a blueprint for our lives. When it came time for college, I earned academic scholarships and worked 2 jobs, one at the campus library and another waitressing on weekends to cover the rest. I was meticulous with my budget, and by my junior year I had managed to save an impressive $15,000 for my final year's tuition and living expenses. That was the year Leo announced he was dropping out of business school. He had a vision, a revolutionary tech startup that was going to change the world. The business naturally needed seed money. My parents sat me down at the same kitchen table where I'd done my homework for years and told me not asked me that they needed to borrow my entire tuition savings. It's an investment in the family's future, Amelia, my father had said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of finality. When Leo's company takes off, he'll pay you back double. We all rise together. I knew with the certainty of a lifetime of broken promises that I would never see that money again. I took out student loans to finish my degree, the interest, a constant reminder of the price of my brother's dreams. I was the family's safety net, the emergency fund that could be raided without notice to cushion his inevitable failures. His tech startup, by the way, burned through the $15 0 inches 6 months and quietly folded. No one ever mentioned it or the money again. Despite it all, despite the mountain of evidence, I never completely cut them off. A foolish, stubborn part of me held onto the hope that one day they would truly see me, that they would be proud of the stable, meaningful, quiet life I had built for myself. When Mark proposed with a simple, perfect ring on a crisp autumn day, I thought that day had finally come. For a moment, it seemed like it had. They were overjoyed. My mother took me dress shopping. My father, in a gesture that shocked me to my core, promised to contribute a staggering $50,000 to the wedding. He hugged me tightly, his voice thick with emotion. "You deserve it, honey," he'd said. "You've been such a good, selfless daughter." For the first time, I allowed a dangerous flicker of real hope to ignite in my heart. I thought this wedding, this beautiful new chapter with a man who truly cherished me, was finally a chance to heal the old wounds, to reset the dynamic. I had no idea they were just sharpening the knife for the deepest, most devastating cut of all. The event that would ultimately expose the rot at the core of my family was the wedding itself. It was meant to be more than just a ceremony. It was supposed to be a symbol of a new beginning, a joyous occasion that could finally bridge the emotional chasm between me and my parents. Mark and I had planned every detail for over a year, a labor of love and shared excitement. We chose a beautiful, sprawling, botanical garden for the venue, a place that felt like an extension of us, peaceful, beautiful, and alive with quiet growth. My parents' unprecedented offer of $50,000 was a complete game changer. It elevated our plans from a simple, modest affair to the elegant wedding we secretly dreamed of but never thought we could afford. It meant we could hire the string quartet I loved, choose the caterer with the rave reviews, and invite all our friends and extended family without having to cut corners. When my father transferred the money into a new joint account he'd set up for me to manage the wedding expenses, I was overcome with gratitude. I cried. It felt like a tangible apology, a long overdue acknowledgement of my worth, a promise that this time it was my turn. This time I was the priority. Mark was my anchor through the entire whirlwind of planning. He was less concerned with the color of the napkins and more focused on the color of my mood. "As long as you're at the end of the aisle," Amelia smiling, "that's all that matters," he would say, his calm presence a soothing counterpoint to my pre-wedding jitters. His family was small, just his widowed mother, Eleanor, a wonderfully warm and unpretentious woman who had embraced me as her own from the moment we met. There were no mind games with Eleanor, no hidden agendas. Her love was as straightforward and welcoming as the open door of her home. Mark's quiet, steadfast affection was a daily reminder of what love should feel like, a stark contrast to the conditional, transactional affection I had spent my life trying to earn from my own family. As the wedding day grew closer, however, small but persistent red flags started to appear, tiny cracks in the gleaming facade of my family's enthusiasm. My mother, who had been so giddily involved in the initial stages, became increasingly distant. Our phone calls, once long and filled with wedding chatter, became curt and rushed. When I asked for her help with the final seating chart, a task she had insisted on overseeing, she waved me off with a vague excuse. "I'm just swamped, honey," she'd said, her voice tight. "Leo's got another business emergency, and your father and I really need to help him navigate it." Leo himself was a ghost. He was supposed to be one of Mark's groomsmen, a gesture of goodwill I had insisted upon, but he missed the suit fitting twice each time with a last-minute dramatic excuse. When I finally cornered him at a family dinner, he was agitated and distracted, his eyes constantly darting to his phone. He muttered about supply chain issues, fickle investors, and the immense pressures of his latest venture, a high-end artisanal coffee company called Perk Up. "Don't you worry, sis," he said, flashing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I wouldn't miss your big day for the world." His reassurance felt less like a promise and more like a line he was delivering. The night before the wedding at the rehearsal dinner, the feeling of unease solidified into a cold, hard knot in my stomach. My parents and Leo arrived nearly an hour late, disrupting the toasts. My father looked pale and profoundly stressed, his gaze fixed on his phone as if awaiting a verdict. My mother's smile was a brittle, painted-on thing, her eyes darting around the room, nervously avoiding mine. Leo attempted to put on his usual charming act, but it was thin, and he spent most of the dinner huddled with my father in a corner of the restaurant, their conversation, a series of hushed, intense whispers. Mark noticed my growing anxiety. "Everything okay?" he whispered, his arm, a warm, solid presence around me. I tried to brush it off for his sake and for mine. It's just the usual drama with Leo's business. It's always something. But deep down, I knew this felt different. This wasn't the familiar hum of family chaos. It was the tense, charged silence before a lightning strike. The final premonition came late that night. My mother was supposed to stay with me in my hotel suite, a mother-daughter tradition we had talked about for years. But at the last minute, just as I was getting into my pajamas, she called to cancel. Her voice was strained, almost breathless. "Leo really needs us tonight, honey. There's a major crisis with the company. A deal is about to fall through. We have to go to his office and help him sort it out. We'll see you at the venue tomorrow, I promise." The disappointment was a sharp, familiar ache. Even on the eve of my wedding, the most important night of my life, I was being preempted by my brother's latest self-inflicted crisis. I tried to be the good, understanding daughter I had always been. But as I sat alone in that beautiful, silent suite, my pristine wedding dress hanging like a ghost in the closet, I felt a profound sense of foreboding. The storm was no longer gathering. It was here. And I was standing right in its path, completely unaware of the true nature of the devastation that was about to hit. The wedding day dawned bright and unnaturally beautiful. A perfect, crisp October morning that seemed to mock the turmoil brewing inside me. The dread from the night before had left a bitter taste in my mouth, but I tried to push it down to force the flutter of nervous excitement that a bride is supposed to feel. My best friend and maid of honor, Clara, arrived at my suite right on time, a beacon of cheerful normalcy, with 2 large coffees and a bag of pastries. Her energy was infectious, and for a little while as we chatted and she helped me lay out my accessories, I almost believed everything would be okay. As the morning progressed, however, the silence from my family became a deafening roar. While my hair was being pinned into an elegant updo and my makeup was being meticulously applied, I kept my phone clutched in my hand, willing it to ring. No "good morning, beautiful bride" text from my mom. No "can't wait to walk you down the aisle" call from my dad. I told myself they were busy, exhausted from Leo's late-night crisis, getting ready, handling last-minute details. I was a master at creating excuses for them. It was a skill honed over a lifetime. The first real wave of ice-cold panic hit when the photographer arrived at 11 a.m. The schedule which my mother had helped create clearly stated that family portraits were to begin then. My parents and Leo were supposed to be there, dressed and ready. I excused myself and stepped onto the balcony, the cool air doing little to calm my racing heart. I called my mom's phone. It went straight to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Carol. Please leave a message." I called my dad. The same robotic voice greeted me. I called Leo. Voicemail. My hands started to shake. "They're probably just stuck in traffic," Clara said, her voice a little too bright. "You know how your mom is with timing." But I could see the lie behind her eyes. We both knew something was terribly wrong. The photographer, a consummate professional, worked around their absence, focusing on me with my bridesmaids, capturing the nervous laughter and the rustle of silk. But every passing minute felt like an hour, each tick of the clock a hammer blow against my composure. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m. At 1:30, I was standing in my gown, the delicate lace feeling like a suit of armor ready to go. And there was still no sign of them. The venue was a 45-minute drive from their house. There was no traffic that could explain this. Helen, the wedding planner, a stern but efficient woman whose calm I had relied on all morning, approached me, her face a grim mask of professional sympathy. "Amelia, we need to make a decision. The guests are seated. The string quartet has been playing for 20 minutes. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. I couldn't breathe. I tried my dad's number one last time, a silent prayer on my lips. He answered. The relief that flooded through me was so intense, so all-consuming, it almost made me buckle. "Dad, oh my God, where are you? The ceremony is about to start," I whispered frantically into the phone, trying not to let the guests outside hear the hysteria in my voice. His voice was distant, thin, and crackling with static. "Amelia, listen, we can't make it." The words were nonsensical, a language I didn't understand. "Can't make it. What do you mean? What's wrong? Is everyone okay? Is Leo hurt?" There was a long, agonizing pause, and in that dead air I heard my brother's voice in the background, sharp, angry, and clear as a bell. "Just tell her already and get it over with." "It's Leo's business," my father said, finally, his voice heavy, with a strange, dissonant mix of apology and defiance. "He ran into some serious last-minute trouble. We had to fly out of state last night to deal with it. We're in Delaware." Delaware, the word hung in the air, absurd and alien. "You're in another state. You left in the middle of the night without telling me, Dad, it's my wedding day. You're supposed to walk me down the aisle." "I know, honey, and I am so sorry," he said, but the words were hollow, a pre-recorded script. "We'll make it up to you. I promise. Just have a beautiful day." And then he hung up. I stood there, phone clutched in my hand, the entire world tilting on its axis. They weren't coming. They had chosen my brother's latest business crisis over walking me down the aisle. The tears I had been desperately holding back began to stream down my face, black mascara trails ruining the makeup I had sat for hours to have perfected. Clara and my future mother-in-law, Eleanor, rushed to my side, their faces a mirror of my own horror. I managed to choke out what happened, my voice breaking into jagged pieces. Eleanor's face, usually so warm and gentle, hardened with a quiet fury I had never seen before. "That is unforgivable," she said, her voice low and firm. "But this day is not about them. It is about you and Mark." Just then, Mark appeared in the doorway, his handsome face etched with concern. He ignored the superstition about not seeing the bride and came straight to me, his eyes searching mine. I heard he said softly, taking my cold hands in his warm ones, "Amelia, look at me. I am here. I am not going anywhere. We can call this whole thing off right now. Or you can take my arm, and we can go get married. It is your choice, and whatever you decide, I am with you." Looking into his steady, loving eyes, I found a strength I didn't know I had. I wasn't going to let them destroy this day completely. Eleanor's own husband had passed away years ago, but she took my arm and walked me halfway down the aisle. Then Mark met me, his smile, a beacon of hope, and he took my hand, walking the rest of the way with me. We were married under a canopy of golden autumn leaves, surrounded by friends who loved us. But every time my gaze drifted to the empty front row where my family should have been sitting, a fresh wave of agonizing pain washed over me. Later that evening at the reception, I tried to call my parents again, hoping for a better explanation, for some sign of remorse. Still no answer. I sent a long, pleading text, pouring my heart out. "Please just tell me what's really going on. I'm so hurt and confused. I don't understand." The reply came an hour later, not from my parents, but from Leo. It was a single dismissive line. "Chill out, Amelia. It was a business thing. Life or death. We'll be back in a few days and explain everything. Life or death. The casual melodrama of it was like a slap in the face. What business deal could possibly be more important than your own daughter's, your own sister's wedding day? The final and perhaps cruelest unmasking of the day came when I was numbly scrolling through social media, desperate for a distraction. A friend had tagged me in a beautiful photo from the ceremony. In the comments section, one of Leo's friends, a man I vaguely recognized, had written a cheerful, oblivious comment. "Congrats, Leo. Hope you guys crushed it with Apex Holdings." Sounded like a huge deal. I didn't know what Apex Holdings was, but a swift, shaking search on my phone revealed it was a prominent venture capital firm with headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware. This wasn't some random, unforeseen family emergency. This was a planned, high-stakes business trip. They had known. They had known for days, maybe even weeks, that they weren't coming to my wedding, and they hadn't had the basic human decency to tell me. That night, as Mark held me while I cried myself to sleep, Clara's words from earlier that day echoed in my mind. We had been sitting together right after the ceremony, and she had taken my hand. "Amelia," she had said, her voice serious and unwavering. "I know you want to believe this is just another misunderstanding, another case of Leo needing to be rescued. But this is different. This isn't just neglect. This feels like a choice, a deliberate, calculated one." At the time, I had pushed her words away, too raw and hurt to process them. But now, in the deafening quiet of my wedding night, the horrifying truth began to crystallize in my soul. She was right. This wasn't a crisis that had pulled them away. This was a strategic decision. They had placed my happiness on one side of a scale and my brother's ambitions on the other, and I had been found wanting. The unmasking was complete. The only question that remained was why. What could possibly justify such a profound, public, and soul-crushing betrayal? I had a sickening feeling the answer was going to be uglier than anything I could possibly imagine. The morning after my wedding, I woke up feeling hollowed out, as if someone had reached inside me and scooped out everything joyful, leaving only a cold, echoing emptiness. The sunlight streaming through the hotel window felt like an intrusion too bright for the thick fog of grief and confusion that had settled over me. Mark was already up, sitting in a chair by the window, a silent guardian watching the sunrise. He brought me a cup of coffee, his movements gentle, and sat on the edge of the bed. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice soft. "Empty," I admitted the word, a small, dead thing in the air. "And stupid. So incredibly stupid, forever believing they would put me first. Just this once." He wrapped his arms around me, a solid, comforting weight. "You're not stupid, Amelia. You're loving and hopeful. That's a gift. They are the ones who are broken, not you." We were supposed to be on a 2 p.m. flight to Italy, the start of a 2-week honeymoon we'd been dreaming about for months. But I couldn't imagine getting on a plane, feigning happiness, sipping Prosecco while my world was in ashes. All I wanted, all I needed were answers. I decided to try calling my parents one more time, hoping that in the light of day some semblance of sanity might have returned. This time my mother answered on the second ring, her voice sounding exhausted but disturbingly upbeat. "Amelia, honey, I was just about to call you. Did you have the most wonderful day? I've seen some of the pictures your friends posted online, and you looked absolutely breathtaking. That dress was perfect." The casual, breezy cheerfulness was so jarring, so completely disconnected from the reality of what they had done, that it made me feel dizzy. "Mom, I need to know what happened," I said, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion I couldn't afford to show. "Why did you lie to me? Why did you abandon me on my wedding day?" She let out a long, theatrical sigh, the familiar sound of victimhood creeping into her tone. "We didn't abandon you, darling. We told you it was a life-or-death situation for Leo's company. He was about to secure a major investment deal, the one that could finally make him a success, but the investors insisted on an in-person meeting. It was scheduled at the very last minute. We had no choice. You had a choice, Mom," I countered, my voice rising despite my efforts to control it. "You could have told me the truth beforehand. You could have sent Leo alone. He's a grown man. Why did you and Dad both have to go? He needed our support, she said, her voice sharp with defensiveness. It was an intimidating meeting. You had Mark. You had all your friends. Leo had no one. The false equivalency was staggering, a masterpiece of maternal delusion. I had my fiancé on the day we were pledging our lives to each other. My brother had a business meeting. In her mind, these two events were of equal emotional weight. The conversation devolved from there, going in circles in a familiar, maddening dance of excuses, justifications, and subtle blame-shifting. I ended the call feeling more lost and heartsick than ever. It was Mark who found it. He had gone out to grab some breakfast for us from a local cafe, a small act of normalcy in a world gone mad. When he came back into the hotel room, he wasn't carrying a bag of food. He was holding his phone out, his face pale with a mixture of shock and fury. Amelia, you need to see this. It was an article from the online edition of the Boston Business Journal published just an hour ago. The headline seared itself into my brain, each word a brand of hot iron local startup, Perk Up Coffee, secures $5 million in last-ditch funding deal with Apex Holdings. And underneath a subheading that made my blood run cold, founder Leo Vance credits family's unwavering support, including a significant personal investment for saving the company from the brink of collapse. I snatched the phone from his hand, my fingers trembling so hard I could barely scroll. The article detailed my brother's nearly bankrupt company, his desperate last-minute trip to Delaware to meet with the venture capital firm. And then there was the quote. A quote from my father, Richard Vance, that explained everything. When your son has a vision, you do whatever it takes to make it a reality, he was quoted as saying the words, dripping with manufactured paternal wisdom. We saw this as an essential family investment. We liquidated some assets and reallocated funds to ensure Leo had the capital required to close the deal. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices for the long-term good of the family. Reallocated funds. The phrase hung in the air, sinister and loaded. My eyes flew to the photo accompanying the article. It was a picture of my parents and Leo standing outside the sleek, glass-fronted office building of Apex Holdings in Delaware. All three of them were beaming, triumphant smiles on their faces. Leo was holding a ceremonial, oversized check. The photo was time-stamped 2:15 p.m. yesterday. The exact time I was standing alone at the altar, my bouquet trembling in my hands, waiting for a father who was at that very moment posing for a victory photo with my brother hundreds of miles away. And then I knew. It wasn't a guess or a suspicion. It was a certainty so absolute, so devastating, it felt like a physical blow that knocked the wind out of me. The $50,000, the generous wedding gift. It was never for me. It was the significant personal investment. They had given me the money, watched me plan my entire wedding around it, signed contracts, paid deposits, and then at the last possible second they had ripped it away and given it to Leo to save his failing company, leaving me humiliated and heartbroken on the most important day of my life. This wasn't a choice between two children. This was a premeditated act. They had actively used my happiness, my wedding, my love as collateral for my brother's business. They had built me up with a false promise only to tear me down when it suited their agenda. That was the moment, the breaking point. The final, irreparable severing of a bond I had spent my entire life trying to nurture and protect. All the years of being the second best, the responsible one, the family safety net, it all coalesced into this one monstrous act of public betrayal. They hadn't just hurt me in private. They had announced their priorities to the entire world in a business journal, framing their deceit as a noble family sacrifice. A strange, cold calm settled over me, displacing the chaotic grief. The tears stopped. The hurt receded, replaced by a steely, diamond-hard resolve. Mark watched me, his expression full of concern. Amelia, I looked up from the phone, my eyes clear and dry. Cancel the flight to Italy, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. We're not going on a honeymoon. We're going to see a lawyer. They had made a critical, fatal miscalculation. They assumed I was the same weak, accommodating daughter they had always known, the one who would eventually cry, get over it, and forgive. They had no idea that their betrayal hadn't just broken my heart, it had forged it into steel. The 48 hours that followed were a blur of cold, calculated, and purposeful action. The profound grief was still there, a heavy stone settled deep in my chest, but it was now overlaid with a thick, protective layer of glacial fury. For my entire life, I had played their game by their rules. I had been the peacekeeper, the diplomat, the one who swallowed her hurt to maintain the fragile illusion of a happy, functional family. That version of Amelia was gone. She had died in a hotel room staring at a picture of her beaming family celebrating her own destruction. Mark was my rock, my command center. He handled the logistics with quiet efficiency, canceling our honeymoon flights and hotel fielding calls from concerned friends with vague but firm explanations, and creating a protective bubble around me that insulated me from the world's well-meaning but painful questions. It was during a quiet moment in our living room, surrounded by wedding gifts, that now felt like artifacts from another life, that he finally revealed the secret he'd been holding on to. A secret that would fundamentally alter battlefield. Amelia, he began, his expression serious. He took both of my hands, his grip firm and steady. There's something I need to tell you. I probably should have told you sooner, but I was scared. I wanted to be absolutely sure that you loved me, for me, not for my circumstances. I braced myself, my already shattered mind unable to fathom another shock. Before I became an architect, he continued, his voice low, I was a software developer. Right out of college, I joined a small startup with a couple of friends. It was a passion project. A few years ago, that little startup was acquired by a major tech company in a massive deal. I was an early partner and, well, the buyout was significant. He paused, letting the words sink in, watching my face. I'm not just comfortable, Amelia. I'm wealthy. Very wealthy. I just stared at him, my brain struggling to connect this new information with the man I knew. Mark, my sweet, down-to-earth fiancé who drove a sensible sedan, preferred quiet nights in to fancy restaurants, and whose greatest extravagance was buying rare first-edition books. He was a multi-millionaire. He saw the utter confusion on my face and rushed to explain. I never touched the money. It terrified me. I put it all in trusts and investments, managed by a team of professionals, and just continued living the life I loved. My greatest fear was meeting someone who would be interested in my bank account instead of my heart. And then I met you. You were so genuine, so fiercely independent and kind. You never once asked about my finances. You fell in love with a slightly nerdy architect. You loved me for who I am. That's all I ever wanted. Tears welled in my eyes, but for the first time in days, they were tears of overwhelming gratitude and love. In my absolute darkest hour, the man I had chosen, the man who had loved me for all the right reasons, was revealing a depth of security I never knew existed. So, when you say we're going to see a lawyer, Mark said, his gentle eyes hardening with a protective fire I had never seen before, we're not going to see just any lawyer. We're going to see the best corporate litigation attorney in Boston. Cost is not, and will never be, an object. The secret weapon wasn't just the money itself. It was the paradigm shift it represented. It meant I didn't have to fight this battle from a position of weakness, scraping together my librarian's salary for legal fees. I could afford the best. I could sever all ties with my family without a moment's fear of financial repercussions. For my entire life, they had wielded money as a tool of control, a lever to ensure my compliance. Now the tables had turned in the most dramatic and unexpected way possible. The next morning, we were sitting in the plush, intimidatingly quiet office of Miss Catherine Sterling, a renowned attorney known for her ruthless efficiency and for dismantling corporate bullies. She was a sharp, impeccably dressed woman in her 50s with an aura of unshakable confidence that was both terrifying and deeply comforting. I laid out the entire story, my voice surprisingly steady as I recounted the history of financial favoritism, the sham wedding contribution, the last-minute abandonment, and the final public betrayal in the business journal. I had come prepared. I provided her with the bank statements from the joint wedding account, showing the $50,000 deposit from my father, and then the complete withdrawal on the day before my wedding transferred to an LLC owned by my brother. Miss Sterling listened without interruption, her expression unreadable as she reviewed the documents. When I finished, she steepled her long, elegant fingers and looked at me over the top of her glasses. "This is not just a messy family dispute, Mrs. Collins," she said, using my new married name with a satisfying finality. "This is a textbook case of fraudulent misrepresentation and promissory estoppel. Your father made a clear and substantial promise of a gift which induced you to act upon it, in this case, signing legally binding contracts for a wedding you otherwise could not have afforded. His premeditated withdrawal of that promise for the financial benefit of a third party has caused you significant financial and emotional damages." She then laid out a plan of action, each step clear, logical, and decisive. "First, we will draft a formal demand letter. It will be delivered by courier to their home and to your brother's company address. It will demand the immediate return of the $50,000 plus compensation for any non-refundable deposits you lost. It will also include a cease and desist demanding they make no further public statements about this family investment. The newspaper article constitutes libel as it falsely portrays you as a willing party to their scheme to defraud his investors." She paused, her eyes sharp. "Given their demonstrated arrogance, they will likely refuse or attempt to manipulate you further. That is when we will file the lawsuit. It will be public, and it will be devastating for them. The discovery process alone, which I will make excruciatingly thorough, will expose your brother's precarious business finances and your parents' long history of financial irresponsibility." Leaving her office, I felt a weight I didn't even know I was carrying lift from my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just reacting to their chaos. I was in control. I had a plan, a powerful advocate, and the resources to see it through to the end. That evening, Mark and I sat down and made another crucial decision. We would not let them steal one more moment of our joy. We rebooked our trip to Italy for the following week. "Let Miss Sterling handle the opening salvo," Mark said, taking my hand. "We deserve a honeymoon. We deserve to celebrate our love away from all of this toxicity." He was right. The plan was in motion. For the next 10 days, while we were sipping wine in Tuscany and rediscovering the happiness that had been stolen from us, a legal firestorm would be brewing back in Boston. My family had no idea what was about to hit them. They expected me to eventually cry, get over it, and fall back into my designated role as the family doormat. They were about to learn that the person they had created through years of neglect was far stronger than they had ever imagined. The 10 days we spent in Italy were a healing balm on a raw, gaping wound. We walked through ancient, sun-drenched streets in Florence, got blissfully lost in the canals of Venice, and ate incredible food in tiny, family-run trattorias in Tuscany. We talked for hours, not about my family, but about our future, our dreams, our shared love for art and history. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a future completely untethered from my past, a future built on a foundation of mutual respect and unconditional love. The physical and emotional distance gave me a profound sense of clarity. This was no longer just about getting the money back. It was about reclaiming my narrative, my dignity, and setting a permanent, uncrossable boundary that would protect my new life. The day after we returned, rested and resolved, an email from Miss Sterling was waiting for me. As she had predicted, her initial demand letter had been met not with remorse but with pure, unadulterated scorn. She forwarded me the official reply from my father's local attorney. It was a masterpiece of narcissistic deflection, accusing me of being ungrateful, vindictive, and materialistic. It claimed the $50,000 was never a gift, but a short-term loan that they had simply recalled for a more pressing family need. It ended by stating they would not be returning a single penny and that if I pursued this frivolous legal action, they would have no choice but to countersue for harassment and defamation. "They've taken the bait and walked right into the trap," Miss Sterling said calmly over the phone later that day. "Their response is legally indefensible and demonstrates their bad faith. They believe you are alone and bluffing. It's time to arrange the meeting. My conference room, Thursday, at 10 a.m. I will inform their counsel that it is a final good faith attempt at mediation before we file the lawsuit and a motion for discovery on Monday morning." My heart hammered in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs, but it was the energy of a warrior preparing for battle, not the anxiety of a victim. I was ready. On Thursday morning, I walked into Miss Sterling's impossibly chic office building holding Mark's hand. I wore a simple professional navy blue dress and low heels, a suit of armor in my own way. We were shown into the main conference room, a large, intimidating space with a long, polished mahogany table and a breathtaking panoramic view of the Boston skyline. Miss Sterling was already there, exuding an aura of calm authority, a neat stack of files arranged perfectly in front of her. My parents and Leo arrived exactly at 10 a.m., a united front of indignant righteousness. My father was dressed in his best suit, projecting the image of a powerful executive ready for a business negotiation. My mother wore a pained, martyred expression, clutching a pearl necklace as if it were a rosary. Leo looked smug, a faint smirk playing on his lips, clearly believing this was just a family squabble I had foolishly and hysterically escalated. They all stopped short when they saw Mark sitting beside me. Their plan had always relied on isolating me. His presence was an unwelcome complication. "Amelia, this is absurd," my father began, taking the seat at the head of the table as if by right. "Involving lawyers in a private family matter is a new low, even for you. The moment you used my wedding fund to bail out Leo's business and then announced it to the press, this ceased to be a private family matter." I replied, my voice cool and steady, echoing slightly in the large room. "This became a financial and legal issue of your own making." For the next 20 minutes, I let them perform. It was a script I had seen my entire life, refined and perfected over decades. My father took the lead, bullying and lecturing me on loyalty, on the bigger picture, on my supposed inability to understand sacrifice. My mother played her part, weaving a tale of emotional manipulation about how much they had sacrificed for both their children and how my selfish actions were tearing the family apart. Leo chimed in with condescending remarks, sighing dramatically about how I just didn't understand the pressures of the entrepreneurial world. They concluded their performance by demanding an apology from me for causing them this stress and forcing them to incur legal expenses. I listened patiently, my face a neutral mask, letting them empty their arsenal of manipulation. When they had finally exhausted their talking points and sat back, expectant and self-satisfied, I looked at Miss Sterling, who gave me a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. "Thank you for sharing your perspective," I said calmly, the sound of my own voice, surprising me with its strength. "Now, allow me to share the facts." I slid a binder across the polished table. "This is a copy of the bank statement for the wedding account. It shows your $50,000 deposit. It also shows the subsequent withdrawal transferred directly to Perk Up Coffee, LLC. This," I added, sliding another document forward, "is a copy of the article in which you, Dad, publicly admit to reallocating those funds for Leo's business, framing it as a family investment." My father scoffed a dismissive wave of his hand. "It was an investment. Your wedding was an expense. I chose the investment for the good of the family." "An investment you made with my money," I corrected him. In the eyes of the law, that $50,000 was not a flexible family fund. It was a specific, documented promise made to me upon which I relied to enter into legally binding contracts. That has a name. It's called promissory estoppel. My father's confident smirk flickered. He hadn't expected me to be armed with legal terminology. Furthermore, I continued my voice, gaining strength with every word. The article implies that I was a willing participant in this sacrifice, as I was not, and as this public lie has caused significant damage to my reputation and immense emotional distress that is libel. You can't prove any of that, Leo sneered, leaning forward. It's our word against yours. Actually, Miss Sterling interjected, speaking for the first time. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension like a shard of ice. We can. We have itemized receipts and signed contracts for every wedding vendor, all dated after the deposit was made. We have emails and text messages where you, Richard, and Carol repeatedly confirmed your financial commitment to the wedding. We have a list of over 100 guests who can testify to the emotional distress and public humiliation your actions caused my client on her wedding day. She let that sink in for a beat before delivering the final devastating blow. On Monday, we will be filing a lawsuit seeking the return of the $50,000 plus an additional $250 0 inches punitive damages for emotional distress, libel, and intentional infliction of emotional harm. Given the public nature of your admission in the journal, I am extremely confident we will win. The lawsuit will, of course, require a full financial discovery of Mr. Leo Vance's business, his personal finances, and your own. I imagine your new investors at Apex Holdings will be very interested to learn about the fraudulent origins of their seed money. The color drained from their faces in unison. Leo looked like he was going to be physically sick. My mother let out a small, strangled sob. My father stared at me, his eyes wide, with a confusion that was rapidly turning to terror. Where? Where did you get the money for a lawyer like her? He stammered the question. A weak admission of defeat. This was the moment. The culmination of a lifetime of being underestimated. I looked at Mark, who gave my hand a reassuring squeeze under the table. That I said, a slow, sad smile touching my lips, is the other thing you so spectacularly miscalculated. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a near whisper, forcing them to lean in to hear their own sentencing. You have spent my entire life assuming I was weak, dependent, and utterly without resources. You operated under the belief that you held all the power because you held the purse strings. But you see, my husband is a very successful man, far more successful than you or Leo could ever dream of being. I watched as the final horrifying realization dawned on them. The shock, the confusion, the dawning terror as they understood that the power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been completely and irrevocably inverted. They had built their family on a foundation of financial control, and they had just discovered their entire system was a house of cards in a hurricane. So you have two options, I said, my voice clear and final. You can write a check today for the full $50,000 and we walk away. I will not pursue further damages, but you will sign a legally binding non-disclosure agreement, and we will no longer have any contact. Or we can proceed with the lawsuit on Monday, and Mr. Sterling will dismantle your finances, your reputation, and Leo's new business deal piece by piece in a court of law. The choice is yours. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by my mother's quiet weeping. They were broken, defeated, and utterly stripped of the arrogance they had walked in with. I had won, but looking at their shattered faces, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a tragedy that had been decades in the making. The decision in the end didn't take long. Faced with the immediate and certain threat of public financial ruin, the humiliation of a court battle, they knew they couldn't win, and the implosion of Leo's life-or-death business deal, there was only one path they could take. My father, avoiding my gaze, silently took a checkbook and a pen from the inner pocket of his suit jacket. His hands, which I had always seen as so strong and capable, trembled slightly as he wrote out the check for $50,000. He slid it across the vast, polished table. It stopped inches from my hand. He couldn't bring himself to look at me. Miss? Sterling, ever the consummate professional, immediately produced the settlement and non-disclosure agreements she had prepared in advance. My father read through them quickly, his face grim, and signed. My mother, her tears silent now, just signed, where he pointed her signature a shaky scrawl. Leo, looking deflated and years older, signed last. His smug smirk was gone, replaced by the sullen, resentful look of a child who had finally been told no and had no one else to blame. There were no dramatic goodbyes, no final cutting words. When the papers were signed and notarized by an associate, Miss Sterling had waiting, Mark and I simply stood up. I took one last look at the three people who had formed the entire landscape of my childhood. They looked like strangers, small and defeated under the harsh fluorescent lights of the conference room. Then we turned and walked out. As the heavy door clicked shut behind us, I felt a shudder run through my entire body, a massive seismic release of tension, of grief, of hope, of anger that I had been carrying for 28 years. I leaned against the cool marble wall in the hallway and took my first deep, truly free breath. It was over. The days that followed were quiet and surreal. The money was back in my account, but I felt no triumphant glee in seeing it there. Instead, I felt clear. For the first time, there was no fog of obligation, no desperate, lingering hope for a change that would never come. There was only the clean, stark reality of the situation. My biological family, the unit I had spent my life trying to please, was no longer a part of my life. The severing was as clean and clinical as a surgical procedure performed with the sharp scalpel of legal documents. Mark and I began the process of building our new life in earnest. The cloud of the lawsuit lifted, we dove headfirst into creating our future. We started looking for a house, not a sprawling mansion to flaunt his wealth, but a home, a place that felt like us. The search itself was an unexpected joy, a collaborative project that was all about our shared tastes with no outside opinions or subtle criticisms. We found a beautiful old Victorian house with a wraparound porch and a slightly overgrown garden in a quiet, tree-lined suburb, a place that felt like a sanctuary. We sent out our wedding thank you notes a month late with a simple, elegant card announcing our new address tucked inside. I didn't offer any explanation for my family's absence from my life. I simply moved forward. I learned that true friends, the people who really matter, understood without needing the sordid details. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, became the maternal figure I had always craved. She didn't try to replace my mother. She simply created a new safe space for me, one built on unwavering support, shared recipes, and genuine warmth. We heard snippets about my family through the reluctant grapevine of extended family. A distant cousin, my mother's, called to say that Leo's big investment deal with Apex Holdings had fallen through. Apparently, word of the mediation and the threat of a lawsuit had reached the investors. They got spooked when they learned the seed money for the deal had been fraudulently obtained. Without that cash infusion, and now with my parents' finances crippled and unable to funnel more money his way, Leo's artisanal coffee company folded within 2 months. The public humiliation was apparently too much. My father, who had staked his entire reputation on his son's success, withdrew from his social and business circles. My mother, I was told, rarely left the house. They had leveraged everything on their golden child, and when he inevitably failed, their entire world collapsed along with him. I felt a distant pang of sorrow for them, but it was the detached sadness one feels when reading a tragic story about strangers. The emotional tether that had bound me to their happiness and pain for so long had been decisively cut. They were finally facing the natural consequences of their own choices, and for the first time in my life, I was not there to cushion their fall. The silence from them was absolute. No calls, no texts, no attempts to breach the agreement. It was as if I had ceased to exist, and in a way, the old accommodating version of me truly had. As Mark and I unpacked boxes in our new home, sorting through books and kitchen gadgets, planning where to plant hydrangeas, I felt a sense of profound peace I'd never known. This was real. This was ours. It wasn't built on sacrifice or obligation. It was built on love, respect, and a partnership of equals. The dawn was breaking on a new life, and for the first time there were no clouds on the horizon. 3 years later, the scent of old paper-rich leather bindings and freshly brewed coffee filled the air. This was my favorite combination of smells in the entire world, and now it was the smell of my new life. After we had settled into our new home surrounded by boxes of books that had been in storage for years, I confessed a long-held secret dream to Mark. I told him I wanted to open a community bookstore and cafe, a place like the libraries I loved, but warmer, more intimate. A third place where people could gather, read, connect, and feel like they belonged. His response was immediate and enthusiastic. With his unwavering encouragement and the financial backing that turned a dream into a business plan, the next chapter was born. It wasn't a vanity project. It was a thriving, bustling business that had in less than 6 months become the heart of our new neighborhood. I worked harder than I ever had in my life, from ordering inventory to managing staff to hosting author events, but every exhausting moment was filled with a deep, quiet purpose. My life was utterly unrecognizable from the heartbroken bride I had been a year ago. My relationship with Mark had deepened into a partnership that was both passionate and profoundly peaceful. We hosted dinner parties on our wraparound porch, our home filled with the easy laughter of friends, our chosen family. Eleanor, my mother-in-law, was a constant loving presence. She taught me her famous lemon meringue pie recipe in my spacious new kitchen and shared stories about Mark as a little boy that made me love him even more. We were building a life rich with the small, ordinary moments of joy I had always craved but never thought I was allowed to have. The scales of justice, it turned out, didn't need a formal courtroom to find their balance. They did so in the quiet, unchangeable court of consequences. The news of my former family's life continued to arrive in reluctant, sorrowful dispatches from my aunt, my mother's sister, who felt a familial duty to keep me informed. She told me my parents had been forced to sell my childhood home, the one they had been so proud of. After Leo's business went bankrupt, he was left with staggering personal debts he had guaranteed. My parents, having co-signed on every disastrous loan, were legally on the hook. Selling the house was the only way to avoid their own personal bankruptcy. They now lived in a small, cramped, rented condo in a town an hour away, a place with no garden and thin walls. Leo, my aunt said, was working a retail job at a big-box store stocking shelves on the night shift. The charm and bravado that had carried him so effortlessly through life had curdled into a bitter, palpable resentment. He blamed my parents for not having more money to give him, for not protecting him from failure. And he blamed me and his distorted reality for sabotaging his one big chance at glory. He had never once, she said, taken an ounce of responsibility for his own poor decisions. My parents' relationship once, a united front in service of Leo's ego, had reportedly fractured under the immense strain of their new reality. My father, his pride shattered and his reputation in his community gone, had become withdrawn, sullen, and angry. My mother, stripped of her social standing and the vicarious success of her golden child, had fallen into a deep depression. They were trapped together in that small condo with the tangible results of their life's choices, with no one to blame but each other and the son they had sacrificed everything for. I ran into my mother once. It was a gray, drizzly Tuesday afternoon at a wholesale grocery store halfway between our respective towns. I was stocking up on coffee beans and baking supplies for the cafe. I saw her at the far end of an aisle, looking smaller, grayer, and older than I had ever seen her. Her clothes were drab, her hair was unkempt, and her shoulders were stooped with a weariness that seemed to go bone deep. She was staring at a display of gourmet artisanal coffee, and the tragic irony of it almost made me gasp. Our eyes met across a pyramid of canned tomatoes. For a long, silent moment, the world stopped. I saw a flash of everything in her eyes: shame, regret, a deep, sorrowful longing, and a flicker of the old resentment. She opened her mouth as if to speak my name, but no words came out. I held her gaze for a beat, and then I gave her a small, polite, impersonal nod, the kind you give a stranger who has dropped something. And then I turned and pushed my overflowing cart down another aisle. There was nothing left to say. Forgiveness was a complex, distant concept I hadn't yet untangled, but peace I had discovered was found in the quiet dignity of walking away. That evening, I told Mark about the encounter. He held my hand across our dinner table and said, "You did the right thing. You were polite, but you protected your peace." He was right. My new life, my new home, my new business, they were all built on a foundation of peace, and that foundation was too precious to risk for a conversation that could lead nowhere. I had established a new boundary, not of anger, but of respectful, unbreakable distance. They had made their choices, and I had made mine. Their unhappiness was not my responsibility to fix, just as my happiness was no longer theirs to control or consume. The justice that had been served wasn't about revenge. It was the simple, undeniable karmic balance of a universe where actions eventually always have consequences. They had chosen a path of deceit and favoritism, and it had led them to a lonely, bitter place of their own making. I had chosen a path of self-respect and courage, and it had led me home. Sitting on the porch of my own home, a home built not on obligation but on a foundation of genuine love and partnership, I've had a lot of time to reflect on the wreckage of my past and the architecture of my future. The journey from that devastating wedding day to this peaceful evening has taught me more than I ever could have learned from a book in my own library. The greatest, most painful, and most liberating lesson is this: you cannot force someone to value you. You can be the most perfect daughter, the most supportive sister, the most accommodating person in the world, but if someone is determined to see you only as a resource, a convenience, or a stepping stone for someone else, your efforts will be like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. You will exhaust yourself and end up empty. My family's betrayal, as calculating and painful as it was ultimately a gift. It was the brutal, undeniable public evidence I needed to finally stop trying. It was the permission I never would have given myself to walk away. It forced me to see that the conditional love I had been fighting for my entire life was an illusion. The real tragedy wasn't losing them. It was the 28 years I had lost, trying to earn their approval, twisting myself into a version of me that was quieter, smaller, and less demanding, hoping that one day they would finally see me. My worth was never contingent on their validation. It was an inherent part of who I was all along. I just needed to be brave enough to claim it for myself. It's tempting to think that Mark's money saved me, but that's not the whole truth. I saved me. His love and his financial support were the tools, the incredible gift that gave me the freedom to act without fear, but the decision to stand up, to draw a line in the sand, and say with every fiber of my being no more, came from a strength had been building my entire life. It was a strength forged in the fire of every disappointment, every unfair comparison, every time I had to provide for myself when they would not. They thought their neglect was making me weak and dependent, but all along they were inadvertently teaching me how to be fiercely, resiliently strong. This experience has redefined the word family for me. True family isn't about blood or a shared last name. It's about respect. It's about showing up not just for the good times, but especially for the hard ones. It's about the people who see your tears and don't ask you to apologize for them. For me, true family is my husband who loved me when I was just a quiet librarian with a complicated past. It's my mother-in-law, Eleanor, who took my arm and walked me down the aisle when my own father was 1,000 miles away celebrating my replacement. It's my friend Clara who saw the truth of my situation and wasn't afraid to speak it, even when I wasn't ready to hear it. Family is the home you build in the hearts of people who choose you, and whom you choose in return every single day. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice to walk away from a toxic family situation to protect your own peace and well-being? What did that experience teach you about your own strength and the true meaning of family? Share your stories in the comments below. I read every single one, and I truly believe that your story could give someone else the courage they are searching for today. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories about overcoming challenges and finding your own power. And don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that their worth is not defined by how others treat them, but by how they choose to treat themselves. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the bravest, most loving thing you can do for yourself is close a chapter so you can finally start writing your own.